Hi, in this episode we're going to be creating our own HDRI lighting rig. So let's jump into Cinema 4D, see what we can see. So, the first thing we're going to want to do, we're going to create a floor. I'm going to use a disk for that. Here you go. What I normally don't do is use the floor from here because it can create a lot of extra calculations with your global illumination, which you probably don't want. I find just a floor like this is sufficient for my needs. You might need the infinite floor for something, but I haven't had a use for it yet myself. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create the floor texture. This is in the physical render that comes with Cinema 4D. You're going to have to do it for your own render if you're using a different renderer to the standard one that comes with Cinema 4D. So we're going to just activate the luminance channel. We're going to activate the reflections channel. That's optional. I normally have it anyway because it tends to look good with the reflections in the floor. You don't have to have it. But if you want it, I'll show you how to do it. All you do is you stick a GGX on it, and then you can. I think we can change the layer Fresnel to conductor. That's generally pretty good. And obviously we don't want the edges to be too apparent, so we're going to add an alpha channel with a gradient texture. Make that circular. And then we're going to invert the gradient just there. And you can see here, it's going right to the edge. We're just bringing it in ever so slightly so when it renders, it won't be quite so obvious that it's gone right to the edge. So the next thing we want to do is name our textures so that we don't get confused when we're using this later on in Anger. When you want to use it in a live production environment, I would recommend naming everything, even if you're not naming the things that you're working on currently. The actual project, you want your light rig stuff to be named so you have quick and easy access to all your controls. So here's our floor, and we need to call that floor, excellent. We'll make a background layer now. Just a plane. Which way are we going with this? We want to go to the Z-axis, and then we'll move this back. Now, the background is one of the things that will really affect your scene, so you want to don't just go with the default size. I'm just going to reduce the width and height segments there because that's just unnecessary geometry. And we'll just make a standard luminance channel for that one. Again, if you're not using physical renderer, whatever your equivalent luminance channel in your renderer would be, that will do you nicely. So that's basically what we've got so far. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is create the sky. Now, the thing about the sky, you can create individual lights in this, or you can just use an HDRI sky file. It depends on what you're doing, really, and I find sometimes if you need to bring out reflections in a metallic product or something like that, an extra couple of lights can come in handy. But it's up to you, really. It's your creative call. The next thing then is the sky, so I'll just create a default material. Normally I just create a luminous channel. That can blow it out at times, and you can use a actual physical sphere and make a giant, but the actual sky object in this case, unlike the background and the floor, is fine because that tends to just light the scene and it's not part of the scene like the background and the floor are. And the reason I do this with the background and the floor instead of using these ones is because when you use depth of field with the physical renderer, at least, it can affect it, because it doesn't know how far away the background is, so it tends to just be in focus, even if it's not supposed to be. So that's one good reason to not use that. So we have our sky material here. We're just going to plonk that down there. Now we have a floor and a background, and it's very, very bright in here. So we'll just see how we get on. Now we need to do our render settings. Make sure we have ambient occlusion checked. What I normally do is just soften the ambient occlusion slightly by just adjusting these sliders here. And then global illumination. A standard Quasi-Monte Carlo secondary and Iridium Cache Legacy as the primary. I normally just have this set to medium. And that's generally a good setting. Normally I'll have a fixed and a medium. What you could see there was my sort of preview render, but I'll just go on decent settings for now. You can go higher, but I find it not necessary. I do a lot of online stuff, so I'm not doing like massive images that are like a meter wide. If you were, you would need that extra bit of power, but then you're looking at kind of maybe renting some render time or something like that from a farm, because obviously the render times can be exponential and you don't really want to give up use of your computer for a week. So it's all about optimization. making sure you're using the right amount of power for the right job and the right amount of settings, because you have to be quite flexible with your CPU power or GPU depending on your render. Obviously the physical in Cinema 4D is CPU based, and that's I'm happy with it. It does me make a good living out of using Cinema 4D as part of my workflow, so it's all good. So let's see what we're going to do now. We're just going to change reflectance channel at a gigax. Okay, stop it. Okay, so there's our GGX. Now we just want to make sure, because that's obviously reflecting all of everything there. So if I was to render that now, it would just reflect everything because it's just everything's white. So we need some contrast, obviously, and that's where we're going to add the HDRI for the sky in a moment. For now, let's just go with a conductor to make it a little bit more metallic. See what we got going on. And obviously, yeah. So that's reflecting fine. Everything is where it should be. You can see a little bit of reflection on the floor there as well. That's groovy. We want to have more control over these, which we're going to get to with the compositing tag. But for now, this will do us. So sky-wise, I'm going to stick a HDRI sky map in here. So I've got these ones I downloaded years ago. One of my favorite ones is Modern Industrial 08. There we go. We'll open that one. We don't need to do that. We'll just use as is, and we'll apply that to our sky, which I've already done. And now we should, yeah, there we go. We see this. We see the reflection now. So obviously that's a little bit. It's a little bit crazy with the background. You see the background on the floor really reflecting in that. There's a couple of options. Sometimes you want the background to be reflected in the object to add that little bit more of kind of depth to it. Sometimes you just don't. You can reduce the width and the height of the background to give you more. And obviously you want to obviously not cut off on your edges there, because you need to be able to see the background visibly. And then this way as well. And then you can just make it as big as you need to make it just to fill that space, and then you'll have your bowl then reflected. And so I'm just going to make another bowl so that we can just get it. 3 bowls. That would be a bit weird, wouldn't it? And there we go. So we are going to move these back. Obviously you need to be kind of like working the whole scene the whole time just for optimal results. This is just what I'm doing here, and it's it's working for the purposes of this demonstration and this tutorial, so I'm going to kind of roll with it. That's basically it. So one of the things that you can see happening here is this reflection of the floor here is being reflected in the spheres. You might not want that. That can be ugly. If I was to make this floor big, if I was to make this floor massive, right? And you see it takes up half the sphere. See, it's taken up a lot of that sphere. The floor is a little bit transparent because of the alpha channel, but we can actually knock that out. So if we just add a compositing tag, which is under render tags compositing, just there. Come here, you. Render tags compositing. And we're just going to exclude the sphere, both spheres. So we just select those, click on the render tag. We've already got our exclusion there, and we just drop these in. And then we shouldn't see any floor reflected in our spheres. And that's basically, the long and short of obviously, now what I was saying earlier about having the edges of the floor alpha channeled so that they're not too apparent. What this line here is, it's intersecting with the background. You may or may not want that, but it's good to have the option not to have it for creative purposes. So what I will do is just move it right back in where it was, and then it won't be intersecting, you see, and you'll get a nice plain white background. You can also do curved backgrounds like in photography and stuff. This is just one way of doing it, but the curved background thing's pretty obvious. There's just no point teaching you how to suck eggs. This is just how to kind of create your own lighting rig. There's a lot of lighting rigs online you can pay money for, but if you want to spend sort of 15 minutes learning how to do your own, then you're away with it. So the next thing we're going to do with this one is we need some other lights if we want kind of ultimate creative control. Obviously we can choose different HDRIs and you can recreate what I'm about to do with an HDRI. However, it's probably better to do it yourself if you want to kind of learn fully and understand it. So we'll just, with these ones, we'll have a luminous channel, and sorry, I've not been doing anything illegal, I've just got really itchy nose. So we want to just add a gradient, and we'll make it circular, and we'll just invert the gradient there. And what that'll give us is this kind of light box type effect when we apply it to our lights. Now, a lot of the rigs you buy online, you know, they'll have like, you know, actual like tripods and stuff with the lights on them just to kind of justify their expense. You don't really need that. You mean you might want it because it gets reflected, but you don't really need it. You can get away with just a plane with some light applied to it. So we'll just reduce the geometry there as well. We'll plus whatever we need to do with that one. So this is what's going to happen with this is we're going to bring it over here. We're going to reduce the size of it because this will be a light. This will be an actual light we're using, yeah. So we'll just move this over here, move this up, and now just imagine this is like a photo studio where you have a light. So here's where our light comes in. Now we're just going to illuminate that. You see now we have that reflected. So if you need any more lighting, or if you just want that extra bit of control, perhaps maybe you might have a bit of metallic here and it's not quite as metallic looking as you want, you can just use a few of these and stick them in there, and that'll be your way around that. Or you can put a bump map on the actual texture itself and just create a really big bump map. That can work too, or a noise map or whatever. Yeah, a noise map under bump map will do the job for that one, but we won't go too much into that here. So we have here now our, yeah, obviously you want these off camera when you're rendering, but you know, you can see here that there's giving us a bit of reflection and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, that's basically how you do it. I mean, I'll show you an example. Let me just get my project out and I'll show you an example of this in action, this type of rig. So I've got my 3D folder here with all these, and I've got one somewhere. Yeah, this one's got a fair bit of metallic in it. So this is a label I designed for a client. It's nutrigums.co.uk, and you can see here, obviously, where I've kind of moved the camera right back and zoomed in just because I wanted to force the perspective. So you can see if I preview render this, it's using the newer global illumination style. I was just experimenting with that at the time. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but when this renders, it will obviously have some light on it. You can see these lights here are circular, and the reason I've made them circular is so that it will complement the curved shoulders. So you see what I mean about kind of tailoring your lights to your objects. And yeah, and then obviously we've got some lights on the front here kind of creating this metallic, because we've got metallic effects on the actual label itself. So, you know, that's what we want to represent, and then just obviously some gummies inside it. But there is a test render of that one. That's a use case for these extra lights. And even if you were to take this sky object and just remove this, clear, you might want to obviously dull your light down a little bit. Then you'd have this reflecting in it as well. So it gives you just kind of ultimate creative control, really. And that's basically it. You know, you want to move these out of the way, and then you can have them massive. Zoom right out there.
A few moments later.
I've just been kind of messing around with it. There's no point showing you. It's pretty obvious from the file that you can see here that I've made a few changes. One of the changes I made, I've kind of minimized the use of this one here, because that was kind of it wasn't really doing the right job for this context. That is a valid kind of thing you can use sometimes, but right now it's not working. So for the purposes of this one, so yeah, I've changed it up and just kind of zooming in here at the balls, and we're just going to render this. So basically, yeah, I've knocked the floor out, so it's not being reflected in the balls, and I've added a floor light here, so it's coming through, so it gives it that extra bit of depth. So that's your kind of light rig there, and I've put the front light in here as well, and I've had to move that behind the camera, so that obviously needs to be big because it's further away, but that gives you that extra little bit of kind of reflection there. And that's kind of it, really. Like I said, I'm going to leave a link to this light rig file in the description, so if you want to download it and play around yourself with it, obviously the link will be there anyway, but it doesn't hurt to make a backup. So I hope you enjoy this. All the best, and I'll catch you up next time. Okay, take care out there and enjoy your 3D journey.